Baby saw a German shepherd being ridiculed and ignored. What he did next left everyone in tears. The morning sun cast long shadows across Willowbrook Park, but something felt wrong. The usual laughter of children echoed through the air, yet an uncomfortable silence hung over one corner of the playground. 5-year-old Alex tugged at his mother Laura's hand, his bright green eyes scanning the familiar swings and slides with unusual curiosity. "Mama, why is everyone looking over there?" Alex whispered, pointing toward a cluster of adults gathered near the old oak tree. Laura followed his gaze and noticed the crowd too. Their voices carried on the breeze, sharp and judgmental. She couldn't make out the words, but their tone made her stomach twist. Something was happening, and it wasn't good. Alex's small fingers tightened around his mother's hand. As they walked closer, the group of adults stood in a loose circle, their backs turned to whatever had captured their attention. Mrs. Thompson from down the street was there along with Mr. Jenkins, and several other neighbors Alex recognized from the grocery store. "That thing is dangerous." Mrs. Thompson's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Someone should call animal control before it hurts a child." "Look at those scars," another voice added. "Probably been in fights. These strays are nothing but trouble." Alex's heart began to race. What were they talking about? He stood on his tiptoes, trying to see over the wall of adults, but all he could glimpse were angry faces and pointing fingers. Then he saw it. Behind the adults, pressed against the base of the oak tree, lay the largest dog Alex had ever seen. The German shepherd's coat was dirty and matted, with patches of fur missing in places that revealed pink scarred skin underneath. The dog's eyes were cloudy, and one ear hung at an odd angle, as if it had been torn and never healed properly. But what struck Alex most wasn't the dog's appearance. It was the way the animal held itself, completely still, head low, as if trying to become invisible. The dog's breathing was shallow, and every few seconds it would glance up at the crowd of people surrounding it, then quickly look away. What happened next will shock you to your core. Alex blinked, throat tight. "The doggy looks sad," he whispered, barely louder than the leaves. "Stay back, honey," Laura said, steady but tense. "We don't know how he'll react," a boy snickered. An adult lobbed a stick that skittered across the roots. Another flicked gravel. Harsh laughter rippled. The German shepherd didn't lunge or snarl. He shrank, pressing nearer to the bark, eyes darting between faces as if counting dangers. Alex slid a hand into his pocket and felt a small crinkled sleeve. Cheese crackers. His lunch treat. He glanced at his mother, then stepped one careful shoe ahead and crouched. With open palm he offered a single square. "It's okay, buddy. Nothing." Then a minute shift, whiskers quivered, nostrils tested the air, and a sandpaper tongue flicked a crumb away. Alex placed another piece on the ground, then another, leaving a crooked trail that ended by his sneaker. The dog crept forward, paws silent, shoulders trembling. He ate gently, never touching skin, his tail giving one hesitant tick. Laura's inhale cut through the murmur. She pulled Alex back by the elbow. "That's enough. We are leaving." Mr. Jenkins pushed to the front, jaw set. "I'm calling animal control right now. Liability like this doesn't belong near families." The dog froze at the words, then tucked his chin. Alex's eyes filled. He tipped the full packet, scattering orange squares across the dirt. "Please don't hurt him," he said. "He's not bad. He's scared." Grumbles rose. Someone filmed. Mrs. Thompson folded her arms. "Fear doesn't excuse danger." Laura faced the circle. "No one here was bitten," she said. "No one was chased. He's done nothing but hide." Sirens sounded in the distance, or maybe Alex only imagined them, because the word control kept echoing. He pressed a palm to his chest. The dog glanced at him, then back to the crowd, as if weighing the boy against Rick. A pigeon flapped down, pecked a cracker and hopped away. The absurdity broke a few smirks. Alex wiped his cheeks. He leaned toward the dog again, softly. "I'll come back, I promise." Laura guided him away. When he looked over his shoulder, he caught the faintest twitch of a tail, a private signal only he seemed to notice. The sight steadied him. He nodded, a solemn vow. "Truly." Behind them Mr. Jenkins muttered into his phone. "Yes, a shepherd. Big, scarred. Send a unit." They left the park before the van appeared. Alex's sneakers scuffed sidewalks past hedges and chalk drawings. At home he set the empty wrapper on the counter like a medal. Laura filled a glass and handed it to him. Her voice had lost its iron. "You were brave, but bravery and safety have to walk together. Do you understand?" He nodded. "Can we check tomorrow?" She hesitated. then sighed. We'll see. Evening drifted into bath time. He made a ship from a cup and sent it across the tub, whispering, "I'll be your friend tomorrow," to the plastic sail. Night settled. In bed, Alex clutched his stuffed bear and watched a moon stripe on the wall. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw cloudy pupils and a lowered head, a body trying to disappear against a tree. "Mama?" he called. Laura smoothed his blanket. He looked like he needed someone. Alex murmured. "Lots of someones need someone," she said. "Sleep now." Still, sleep refused. Rain began far away, a hush that grew until it tapped the window. Thunder mumbled. Alex pressed his forehead to the cool glass. Somewhere out there a dog waited beneath branches that creaked when the wind changed. He thought of the promise he had made, of how promises should not be left alone in the dark. He squeezed the bear and whispered into its patched ear, "I'll be his friend tomorrow." By sunrise, Alex was already awake, the promise he had made flickering in his chest like a pilot light that never goes out. He dressed without help, tucked a fresh packet of cheese crackers into his backpack, and stood beside the table, while Laura measured coffee. "Mama, can we go back?" "Just to walk through, I promised." She considered the risk, the talk and the way fear dresses itself as prudence. "We'll walk through," she said at last. "No touching unless I say, and we leave if anything feels wrong." He nodded with solemn relief, and gulped his cereal like a runner at the starting line. On the drive, Willowbrook streets looked newly washed. Puddles caught the light and threw it back like coins. Laura's hands rested at 10 and 2, and her eyes kept returning to the mirror where Alex watched the world fly backward. "If we see the dog," she said, careful and calm, "we give him space." He pressed his lips together. "I know, but I brought breakfast." She almost smiled despite the knot in her stomach. "Of course you did." They reached Willowbrook Park while the sprinklers still threw brief rainbows between benches. The air smelt of cut grass and wet iron. A jogger waved, a stroller squeaked, a crow scolded from a lamp. Alex saw the oak and quickened, then stopped. Blaze hadn't left. He lay in a guarded half-curl against the trunk, alert without aggression, a sentinel pretending to be a shadow. Fresh harm brightened against the coat, a narrow slice on the foreleg, beads of dried blood along the paw, and a hitch in the hind step that made him set weight like a man avoiding a nail. Someone had thrown something, or a night had gone unkind. Alex made a sound that was not a word. Laura's breath shortened. "Stay beside me," she said. They approached at an angle, shoulders low, hands visible, voices down. Blaze tracked them without lifting his head, eyes clouded yet intent, and when Alex stopped a few feet away, the shepherd's tail gave a small hesitant tap that looked like a question. Alex lowered himself slowly, and poured 3 crackers into his palm, then made a small trail across the roots that ended at his sneaker. "Breakfast," he whispered. Blaze tested the air and inched forward, whiskers trembling. He took the first square with a feathering touch, paused as if to ask permission from the quiet itself, then took the next and the next. The tail that had barely twitched yesterday gathered a little courage, and tapped the ground. Laura crouched beside her son, reading the gentleness building in front of her like a scaffolding of trust. Up close, she saw the limping more clearly, the wince he tried to hide, and the way he held still, not out of defiance but because motion often invites her. "Hey there," she said softly, not reaching. "You're okay." Blaze blinked as though translating. A tiny breath left him, almost a sigh. Alex smiled so wide it seemed to pull light closer. He set 2 more crackers near his shoe. Blaze accepted them without touching skin, then lifted his gaze and held the boy's eyes for a count that felt like a handshake. Footsteps and commentary rolled up the path like a tide that enjoys hearing itself speak. Mrs. Thompson arrived in a floral visor, Mr. Jenkins with his jaw set to permanent verdict, and behind them a small cluster of neighbors who prefer a crowd to a doubt. "Feeding it again," Mrs. Thompson announced, not to inform but to accuse. "Some people don't learn." Mr. Jenkins lifted his phone like a badge. "I warned the department," he said. "Liability breeds more of itself." A teenager palmed a phone and started filming, angling for outrage. Laura kept her focus on Blaze. "He's eating gently," she said. "He's limping." "Danger limps before it lunges," Mrs. Thompson replied. Alex set another cracker near his shoe. Blaze accepted it without touching skin, then looked up at the boy as though measuring him for trust. A warmth spread through Alex that had nothing to do with sun. He could feel an invisible thread tightening between them. A white van with tired blue lettering nosed into the lot and idled near the curb. Animal Control wrote the door in a font that presumes authority. The crowd drew tighter, relief and excitement hopping between shoulders. Blaze flinched at the brake squeak, weight shifting through his body like a ripple. The side door slid, and a woman in khaki stepped out with a clipboard and a catch-pole. She didn't look cruel, she looked practiced, the way routine can shave softness from a face. "Morning," she said. "We've had calls." Her eyes took in the scene. A boy, a mother and a dog that tried to be smaller than its bones. "Let's keep calm," she added, and for a second her voice seemed to drape a gentler fabric over the gathering. Alex moved instinctively so his small body sat between the pole and the shepherd. "He's not scary," he told the air, and maybe the air passed the message along because Blaze's eyes softened. Laura touched Alex's shoulder. "I'm right here." The officer kept her voice even. "I'm going to loop this. Nice and easy," she said, lifting the pole only a little. Metal winked in the light. Blaze's lips drew back with a low warning that vibrated against Alex's ribs. Not attack, alarm. The crowd seized the cue. "See? Dangerous," Mr. Jenkins declared. "Told you," Mrs. Thompson said. Victory bright. The catch-pole hovered nearer. The shepherd's body locked. Alex heard fear moving like electricity through muscle. The sound sliced him. He hugged Blaze's neck with both arms. Not squeezing, just holding as if he could anchor a storm with a child's grip. "You can't take him," he cried, tears bright and brief on his lashes. "Please don't." Laura knelt beside them, palms steady on Blaze's shoulder, pressure feather-light. "Easy, big guy," she whispered, a sentence meant for dog and boy alike. The officer paused, reading posture instead of rumor. The growl ebbed as Alex breathed. The tail lifted a fraction. Mrs. Thompson found a higher gear. "If you let it stay, what message does that send? That we reward strays for trespassing?" Laura didn't look up. "Maybe it sends a message that we recognize fear when we see it." Mr. Jenkins pointed at the torn ear with the authority of a guess. "That's fighting." The officer shook her head. "Not how ring dogs mark," she said quietly. "Looks like work, not sport." The teenager filming faltered. "Complexity ruins the algorithm's favorite meals." Laura's knees clicked as she lowered fully, eye level with a dog who had taught himself to be small. "You're okay," she said, meaning every syllable. Alex poured more crackers. Blaze took them one at a time with ceremonial care. The van's radio crackled. A dispatcher asked for an update. "Hold a minute," the officer answered. The word landed oddly. Blaze's head lifted. He glanced toward the street as if the syllable had a history. A dark sedan idled by the curb, windows so tinted they reflected the playground like a black mirror. He watched it with a focus that did not belong to a stray. Alex followed the look and frowned, then pressed closer, hand resting over a heartbeat that steadied under his palm. "He's scared, not mean," he said, and the plain truth carried farther than his size suggested. A few in the cluster shifted, because certainty strains when a child names it false. The officer tried again. "Big guy, I need to get a look," she murmured, lowering the loop until it touched fur without tightening. Blaze tensed at the instrument itself, a memory compressed into reflex. The warning rose again, deep and involuntary. "See?" someone hissed. Alex kept his face near Blaze's cheek. "It's okay," he breathed. The shepherd's nostrils flared at the scent of crackers and child, and the faint citrus of Laura's soap. The growl thinned to a hum. Laura found herself saying words she hadn't planned. "If I keep him on our porch for a few hours, could a vet meet us there?" The officer blinked. "Fostering requires paperwork," she said, "but I can call a supervisor." Mr. Jenkins scoffed. "A porch today, a lawsuit tomorrow." Mrs. Thompson adjusted her visor. "If you take it home and it bites, don't say we didn't warn you." The ground felt tilted between two worlds, one where procedure ends a story, another where patience writes a different chapter. Before the argument could harden, a new sound threaded the air, the measured scuff of boots on the path.
a cadence so specific that Blaze's entire body registered it before any face turned. He surged to his feet despite the limp, tail beating the dirt in wild thudding arc. A noise climbed from his chest, high and desperate, not anger but relief so sharp it trembled. Heads turned. From the shade beyond the sycamores stepped an elderly man, in a faded military jacket, cuffs frayed, cap bleached, boots polished out of habit, eyes pale gray, rimmed with blue and wide with disbelief, moving with the careful economy of someone who has spent years saving motion for when it matters. He lifted his hands, palms open, and walked toward the oak, while the park fell quiet enough that even the crows stopped mid-scold. The elderly man in a faded military jacket approached, and Blaze went wild with joy.
The man stopped a few paces from the oak, breath-catching as the German shepherd burst forward with happiness that shook dust from the roots. "Easy, partner," the stranger whispered, voice cracked yet warm. He crouched and set a trembling hand to the dog's chest. The tail beat an eager rhythm. Laura drew Alex close, unsure whether this reunion meant safety or fresh risk. The officer in khaki lowered the pole and stepped back. Neighbors hushed, phones faltering. The man pressed his forehead to the dog's and closed his eyes. "This is Echo," he said when he rose. "My canine partner, missing 2 years." A ripple moved through the circle. Mrs. Thompson's visor tilted. Mr. Jenkins blinked. The officer's stance shifted toward respect. Alex tasted the name like a solved riddle. Echo nudged the boy's shoulder, then pressed his brow to the man's knuckles with ceremonial care. Scars stayed, yet posture lifted. "I'm Robert Hayes," the man said, touching the faint stamp on the torn ear. "Retired. We cleared schools, found missing grandparents, swept fairs and went home together night after night, until sickness benched me." A worn laminate showed Echo beside a younger Robert, both square and alert. Alex leaned closer, beaming. "How did he end up alone?" Laura asked. Robert exhaled. "Cancer treatment. I checked into chemo. Officer Bradley offered to exercise Echo and keep him sharp at his place. Then a text claimed he ran. Paperwork followed. I was too sick to push, and by the time strength returned, the trail had cooled. I kept looking anyway." Echo licked his wrist. The officer nodded toward the van. "If he's a working partner, records exist." Robert didn't hesitate. "Call them. He knows me." He gave a quiet cue. "Sit." Echo folded into a perfect square, tail low, eyes bright. A hush rinsed the path. Even the teenagers paused. Alex edged closer. "I called him Blaze," he said. "Echo fits better." The dog leaned, accepting the revision. Laura crouched beside her son. "He needs a vet," she said. "Fresh cuts." A limp. Robert's mouth tightened. "I can't keep him," he admitted. "Assisted living. Therapy hours. Strict rules. No overnights. If you're willing, I'll pay for every visit, and teach your boy the commands, so Echo understands your home." Alex looked up with hope, so bright it felt like sunlight given shape. Laura weighed duty and compassion, then looked from Robert to Echo to the officer. "We can try," she said. The words steadied everyone. The officer called a supervisor and scanned Echo's shoulder. A chip pinged. "Match confirmed," she said. Tone gentle. Robert sank to the roots and spoke briefly. A winter raid saved by Echo's stillness. School assemblies where tough kids softened when a serious dog placed a paw on unlaced shoes. Nights when returning meant relief poured like water. "When cancer walked in," he said, "I thought time apart would pass. It didn't." He scratched under Echo's jaw. "You waited." Echo's eyes shone. Alex listened as if the world had tilted into alignment. "Did he ever get scared?" he asked. Robert smiled. "Courage is obedience with shaking knees." The officer finished her calls. "We'll document injuries, then release him to your temporary care while records finalize," she said to Laura, handing over a card. Laura slipped it into her pocket. "We'll go to—" Robert rose slowly, steadied by the oak. Laura offered an arm. He accepted without pride losing ground. "May I show a few cues?" he asked Alex. The boy passed the crackers. Robert broke one piece, lifted 2 fingers to his temple, and lowered them. "Focus."
Echo's gaze locked. They took 3 small steps, the dog placing shoulder by knee despite the hitch. Down, he folded, chin on paws. Watch. Stillness became a choice rather than a cage. Alex mirrored each motion, voice soft yet Echo responded as if the thread between them had been braided overnight. Robert's pride lit his lined face. Laura felt something open inside, willing and alert. The remaining neighbors dispersed, disappointed that disaster had refused to perform. Mrs. Thompson tugged her visor straight and left. Mr. Jenkins offered a curt nod and retreated. The officer stowed the pole. "I'll file this as a handler recovery pending review," she said. "The clinic will photograph everything. Keep him quiet. Water, light food, and call if anything changes." Robert turned to Alex. "You gave him kindness when others offered gravel," he said. Alex stroked Echo's neck, feeling steadiness under scarred fur. Laura met Robert's tired eyes. "We'll keep him safe while we can," she said. Robert looked to the sky. "Bless you," he whispered. Then, speaking for anyone who needed permission to hope, he added, "If you've ever given a second chance to someone everyone else wrote off, comment below. Your story might be the spark another soul needs." They walked toward the exit together. Echo matched Alex's stride, brushing his knee, determined though uneven. Laura carried the card, and a phone already dialing a clinic. Robert kept pace with care, cap low, jacket worn, dignity intact. Traffic murmured beyond the hedge. Across the street a black sedan idled, windows dark enough to catch the park like a mirror. Its engine whispered. No one noticed. Echo flicked an ear, glanced once, then looked back to the child who had fed him breakfast and given his name without asking for anything in return. At the curb, Laura opened the car and spread a blanket over the back seat. Robert guided Echo to step up slowly, praising each careful movement. Alex climbed in beside him, seatbelt clipped, palm resting lightly on fur. Clinic first, then home. The word home surprised her, but it didn't ring false. Robert closed the door with a touch that lingered on the frame. He passed Laura an envelope with cash and a card for transfer. "For bills," he said. "I meant what I promised." She didn't argue. The officer lifted a hand in farewell and returned to the van, already drafting the note that would keep this moment from being erased by later noise. Laura started the engine. Wipers cleared a faint film left by night rain. Echo settled, head on Alex's thigh, eyes half closed, breath deepening in the ordinary peace a moving car gives to weary hearts. Robert buckled beside Laura, quiet now, the line of a soldier's posture eased by relief. He always loved working. He will love resting with purpose more. Alex whispered one word, testing it like a key. Echo. The dog's tail thumped once. The sound felt like a door unlocking. Robert added quietly. Bradley swore he searched, filed forms and called shelters. I wanted to believe him. Treatment fogged my days. Doubt fogged the rest. Every week I checked lots, scanned sites and asked handlers. Tips fizzled, rumors tangled, and grief made noise where facts stayed thin. Laura listened, sympathy and resolve braided. Whatever happened before, she said. He isn't alone now. Robert nodded once, as if a pin had been pushed through a map. Thank you, he said. Let me shoulder costs, not just stories. Vets, meds. I owe him care and you time. Laura accepted with a nod.
The clinic wrapped Echo's foreleg in a neat white bandage, and his limp softened to a careful hitch. Laura parked, opened the door, and let Alex hop down first. The shepherd inhaled the block-tasting weather, then followed the boy inside and chose the living room window. He circled once on a blanket. Laura laid beneath the sill, lowered his chin to the wood, and watched the street like a sentry. Robert arrived the next morning in his faded jacket, with a canvas bag. Cues and clarity, he said, placing treats, a short lid, a long line, and a clicker on the table. Echo rose from the blanket, and stood by Alex as if class were in session. Robert lifted 2 fingers. Heel, shoulder met knee. Sit, a square formed. Down, chin on pause. Watch, the gaze locked without strain. Alex copied the gestures, voice low and patient, and Echo matched him, pleased by the work. The days that followed settled into a steady rhythm, Brief morning sessions ended on a win. Robert visited daily, never staying long, showing Alex how to read small messages. A turned ear for worry, a softened mouth for ease, a lifted paw for question, and a breath held for caution. Laura watched from the doorway, learning the same alphabet and realizing fear shrinks when you can name it. Through it all, Echo kept a window post, mapping footsteps, vans, bikes, and the Maples' afternoon sway. On the second day, a black sedan slid along the curb with glass so dark it reflected the block like a mirror. Echo stiffened, rose, and tracked the car until it turned the corner. Laura felt the tiny lift of hair along her arms and told herself not to be dramatic. Echo lay down, though his eyes stayed bright, as if he had put a page aside for later review. The sedan returned the following afternoon when pickups eased and the street relaxed. Echo stood, tail level, ears forward, and gave one decisive bark that sounded more like acknowledgement than threat. Alex pressed his nose to the glass. "Same car?" he asked. "Looks like it," Laura answered, surprised by the certainty in her chest. The vehicle lingered a beat too long at the stop sign, and rolled away. Echo watched it vanish, and resumed his post, calm, but engaged. On the third day it parked across from the house, and idled for 9 long minutes. No one got out. Echo rose immediately, and held still, muscles alive without shaking. When the driver's door cracked an inch, and shut again, Echo gave 2 short barks with a measured gap between them. Robert, pouring tea, set the mug down, alert without escalation, he said. "He sees a pattern." Laura snapped a photo, and the car drifted off before she could frame the plate. The wind came up that night, and made the maple scratch the siding. Alex slept with his bear tucked under his arm. Laura checked locks, slid the back door closed, and listened to the refrigerator. A little after 2, Echo lifted his head and padded to the kitchen. He planted himself by the glass, weight forward, ears slicing the dark. A faint scrape moved across the deck, a slow testing sound, like a gloved hand searching for a seam. Echo exploded into sound. 3 barks slammed the room, stopped, and 2 more followed after a breath. The cadence of a trained warning. The scrape cut off, feet skidded, a trash can clattered. Far down the block a siren chirped, and then built as a patrol looped the grid. Someone vaulted the side gate and ran. Echo stood steady, voice large, body anchored. Laura called the non-emergency line and reported a probable attempt. Alex appeared in the hall, hair wild, and hugged the dog's shoulder without fear. Dawn showed a thin scratch by the lock, and a fresh gouge along the rail. Robert examined both with a flashlight. "Hurried," he said. "Probe, not commitment." He praised Echo for holding the barrier rather than chasing. The shepherd accepted the hand on his neck with a small sigh, and returned to the window, posture relaxed but ready. On the school run the car pulled faintly right. Yesterday it drove straight. Laura parked, crouched, and checked the tires. The pull remained on the way home. After dropping Alex and collecting a soft tail thump from Echo, she peered beneath the rear bumper. A black puck clung by a magnet near the frame. Matte, deliberate, and wrong. She didn't touch it. She called Robert, and kept her voice even while her hands shook. He arrived within minutes, slid onto cardboard, and eased the device free. "GPS tracker," he said, turning it in his palm. "Cheap housing, fresh battery, strong magnet." Laura steadied herself against the fender. "How long could it have been there?" "Long enough to map habits," he answered, sealing it in a bag. "We'll hand it to a detective, and ask for extra loops." He looked at Alex. "Very rough. Check mirrors. Let Echo lead the last steps to the door. His nose knows what we miss." Alex frowned. "What does it do?" "It tells bad people where a good friend sleeps," Robert said, crouching to the boy's height. "We're not giving them that advantage." He patted Echo's shoulder. "Your partner caught their interest. Your mom caught their tool. That is why teams win." Laura swallowed. "Is this about money?" Robert met her eyes. "And pride. Trained K9s bring black market prices. Rings steal and launder identities, and sell them to private outfits, or criminal crews. To the wrong buyer, a veteran like Echo is worth 6 figures when trained." The number sounded obscene in a kitchen that smelt like toast. Alex wrapped his arms around the dog. Echo answered with a deliberate chuff that felt like steady ground. They built new routine.
Laura kept the blinds tilted so she could watch without shouting in fear. Alex practiced recall from every room until Echo's return felt like tid work. Robert taught a silent alarm. 2 taps on the doorframe meant take position by the mudroom and listen. Laura showed Alex how to open the emergency screen on her phone. In 3 motions. They rehearsed once, then folded the plan away like a drill. An officer collected the tracker that evening, photographed the scratches, and promised extra pass. If the sedan returns, call and stay inside, she said. Robert changed the back bulb for a brighter one, oiled the slider, and dropped a wooden dowel into the track. He drew a quick map of sightlines, and pointed to the neighbor's porch as a rally spot if separation ever made sense. Echo watched the pencil move, as if memorizing the drawing. Night settled with less dread and more purpose. Echo climbed to the window, chin resting on the sill. Alex's laughter faded to bedtime quiet. Laura stood behind the dog. The shepherd neither trembled nor he watched the block he had adopted, breathing slow, present by choice. A guardian who had decided this window was his, this family was his, and whatever shadows tested the edges would meet a voice trained to hold the line.
Thunder rolled across Willowbrook, and daylight dimmed at once. Clouds pressed low over the roofs, and rain thickened until the street blurred. Echo took his window post and watched the water fold and refold. Laura checked the forecast, saw a hard band sweeping the map, and set flashlights beside a charged power bank. Alex tapped the glass and asked if storms had names. "This one means business," she said. The first rumble flickered the lights, the second killed them. The refrigerator sighed. The TV went dark, and the house shed its soft hum. Laura lit 2 candles on metal trays. Echo repositioned between the family and the backslider, breath steady, ears reading the perimeter. A neighbor texted about a line down near the corner. Laura thought of Mrs. Alvarez 3 doors over, who used a cane and lived alone. "I'm going to check on her," she said, pulling on boots and a slicker. "Stay with Echo. If the wind rises, go to the hallway." Alex nodded. Echo escorted Laura to the mudroom and returned to the slider when she tapped the frame twice. Their signal outside, rain found every seam and turned the sidewalk into a shallow stream. Mrs. Alvarez opened with a candle in her hand. Silver hair pinned tight, sweater buttoned wrong. "Power's out," Laura said. "Do you need anything?" The neighbor asked for 2 batteries and a minute of company. Laura gave them the keys, checked the stove, waited through 3 gusts, and promised to return if the lights stayed off. She fought the rain back home and found Echo waiting, head low, eyes following her through the glass. He met her at the entry and pressed against her legs, as if counting them. Alex angled the flashlight at the ceiling and said the thunder had walked closer. They built a floor picnic with peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices, and tried to make the storm feel ordinary. The house shuddered once, then again. Echo lifted his head and froze. The shiver of glass came next, faint but clean. He rose without a sound, shoulders widening, weight forward, and set himself between the couch and the slider. Laura clicked her light off and placed a finger to her lips. Alex slid behind the couch and stayed low. The sound repeated, followed by a slow breath on the other side of the glass. The storm gave the trespasser cover, and the trespasser took it. A gloved fist appeared at the edge of the pane. A knurled tip punched once. A spider crack raced outward. The second strike opened a hole big enough for a wrist. Rain blew through in a cold sheet that smelt of metal and mulch. A tube slid in, matte and utilitarian, the kind used when speed matters and noise must be kept down. Echo's bark detonated. 3 sharp reports slammed the room and stopped. Then 2 more followed with a measured gap. It was not frenzy. It was a trained warning. The tube twitched. A dart thudded into the cabinet and stuck like an ugly tooth. Laura swung the flashlight 2-handed, not as a flail but as a drive, and cracked the wrist through the gap. The tube fell, struck the deck, and rolled toward the rail. The intruder cursed. The single word snatched by the storm. The black sedan that had haunted their block glowed at the curb. Echo hurled his body against the slider, without trying to break it, teeth flashing close to the hole without crossing it. Control showing what Robert had taught.
Another dart zipped past and lodged in the ceiling plast. Alex kept still behind the couch, breath steady because Echo's back said, "Stay and listen." Sirens woke near and grew until they bounced between houses. A neighbor shouted from a porch. The intruder tried to vault the gate, slipped, and rattled the latch. Boots slapped wood. The sedan's engine coughed once, then went quiet as if the driver did not want a recorded departure. Echo held the frame, voice tight and measured, a signal drawn in sound. Laura pulled Alex to the hall and pressed the emergency sequence on her phone. She described the brake, the darts, the vehicle, the power loss, and the direction. The dispatcher kept her talking until the first cruiser rounded the corner with lights pulsing and wipers beating time. 2 officers cleared the deck while another swept the side yard. One found the tube, gloved it, and bagged it. A third collected the dart from the cabinet and the one in the ceiling. "Sedative," he said. "Not for wildlife." Echo eased to Laura's side and sat, chest heaving, discipline holding him on the near edge of pursuit. An officer glanced at him with gratitude. "Good dog," he said, and meant it. Laura walked the sequence again for the report. Electricity still slept, so lightning flashes and flashlight cones staged each pause while radios chattered over the rain. Alex listened without letting go of Echo's collar. A sergeant measured the hole and the tool marks near the latch. "Planned," she said. "They wanted a silent entry and a quick exit, with a sedated animal." She photographed scratches on the frame. "You were targeted," she added. A detective in a rain shell arrived, asked for details on the black sedan, and studied the single photo Laura had taken earlier in the week. The numbers blurred, but a bent frame bracket and a sticker ghosted through the water. He nodded. "Not random," he said. "It circles marks and uses the storm for cover." Robert called. Laura told him they were safe. He listened, then took a breath that sounded like relief, trying not to be angry. "How is he?" She put the phone near Echo's ear, and Robert spoke 2 quiet words the old partner knew by heart. Echo's tail thumped once. Something in the room steadied. The patrol promised extra loops through the night. The detective sealed the tube and darts into box. As he stood, he glanced at Alex, and then at Echo. "Kids tell the truest things," he said. "What should we write?" Alex answered with the same plain courage he had used in the park. "He stayed. He didn't chase. He listened. He kept us here." The detective wrote exactly that. Thunder drifted farther, but the rain kept its steady march outside relentlessly tonight. Before the team left, Laura looked at the officer's shoulder camera and spoke past the rain, knowing neighbors would ask, and strangers might see. Share in the comments. Has a pet ever protected you? Let's honor these silent guardians. Her cheeks were wet from the storm, and not only the storm. One officer paused at the slider and checked the frame again. He glanced toward the yard, then said he had heard something before the team reached the port. The intruder had tripped, hissed a short curse, and muttered a line that stuck. "Boss is someone you'd never suspect." The words hung like a hook in the wet air, tugging at everything they thought they understood. Echo lifted his head and looked past the glass into the rain, as if the storm had whispered a name and then swallowed it.
Rain lingered after the sirens, and by morning the maple still dripped. Echo lay by the window, alert. Laura brewed coffee and called Robert. He arrived with a thermos and a bandage. The detective spread photos on the table and circled the gouge by the slider. "The entry was rehearsed," he said. "They used the storm for cover and tagged your car last week." Robert's jaw tightened. He was a partner. To them, he's inventory. "We want them in cuffs," the detective said. "But we need them to show their hand." Laura set her palms on the counter. "Say it." "We keep Echo near the back door," he answered. "Visible. Monitored. 2 unmarked cars down the block. A plainclothes officer on the porch. Sensors on the slider, and audio under the sill. If they return, we take them before anyone crosses glass." "You want to use him as bait," Laura said. "We want them to commit where we control the field," he replied. "The instant a tool shows, the team moves." Robert glanced at Echo. "He has held decoy positions," he said. "He understands pressure, but he also has a child who thinks in promises." He looked at Alex, who sat on the rug building a card tower, pretending not to listen while storing lines. We are not parading him, Robert added. He holds on lid. Laura stands 3 feet back. I stand between, and the moment a pry hits wood we end it. Laura nodded. We cooperate. Right now, together. They set the evening. Patrol would tighten loops at dusk. Lights would stay off to sell the blackout. The porch chair would face the street. The team rehearsed signals. Robert wrote 3 cues on a sticky note. 1 tap on the kitchen frame meant stay put. 1 in the hallway meant go to the bathroom. And 2 in the mudroom meant take Echo to the utility corner and wait. Alex kept stacking cards. Hands careful, eyes bright. Bait, he thought. The word felt like a hook under Echo's collar. He pictured a tube sliding through glass, and a dart stuck in the cabinet, like a cruel bee. He saw a gloved hand closing on the leash, while he slept. Each picture ended with absence, sitting where a friend had been. Echo crossed the room, and set his chin on Alex's knee. Alex combed scarred fur with his fingers. They think they can take you because you are brave, he whispered. Brave stays, but I can move. Robert and the detective stepped onto the porch to confirm sightlines. Laura followed to check the chair and timing. Alex went to his room, pulled his backpack from the closet, and set it on the bed. He chose 2 granola bars, a wrapped cheese stick, a water bottle, and the stuffed bear whose ear he had talked to on storm night. He added a small flashlight, and a folded bandana from spring hikes. He wrote on a card and propped it on his pillow, taking Echo for a walk. Be safe. I love you. Miller's Woods waited 2 streets away, where the path ducked behind the ball fields, and slipped under pines that watched boys grow tall. Weeks earlier, Robert had shown Alex a hidden treehouse, plank floor tight, ladder firm, trapdoor snug, a place to read or practice quiet. A good refuge, Robert had said, keeps edges smooth and exits clear. He knelt by the window seat and tapped the frame twice. Their signal for position. Echo opened his eyes and followed him down the hall. Alex clipped the leash, but left it loose, slipping the loop over his wrist like a promise that moved. The house hummed with distant voices. The thought that he might make everything messier hurt, yet the thought that staying might end with an empty blanket hurt more. In the mudroom he pulled on sneakers, zipped his jacket, and tucked the bear into the backpack so the stitched ear would not catch. He checked the driveway through the pane of glass. No sedan, only wet asphalt, reflecting afternoon. He cracked the back door and let thin rain wash noise from his steps. Echo paused to read air, then pressed close. They crossed the yard, slid through the side gate, and stepped into the alley. Alex chose puddles that hid his prints and kept his shoulders low. He remembered Robert's lesson about moving like nothing special. Look around as if your only job is to notice how tall the daisies grew after rain. They reached the corner by the old stone wall where ivy hung like a curtain. Beyond it, the path to Miller's Woods began, as a strip of dirt, tucked behind a chain-link fence. He timed his crossing with a delivery truck that blocked sightlines, then slipped through and followed the trail where it curved. Echo matched cadence, ears swiveling. The leash lay soft against Alex's wrist. The world smelt like sap and damp earth. At the clearing the treehouse waited, roof dark, boards beaded with rain, a small room held up by careful choices. Alex climbed the ladder 1 rung at a time, then turned and clicked his tongue. Echo calculated angles, gathered power, and vaulted with clean grace that sent a rush so bright. The boy almost laughed. Alex lifted the trapdoor, tugged the leash inside, and lowered the panel until it settled. He spread the bandana on the floor, and made a small bed. He rationed food as Robert had taught, small bites each hour, water and sips. He held the bear while the rain softened, and the world tasted like pine tea. He told Echo about being brave in the right ways, the kind that keeps friends intact, rather than the kind that wins applause. Echo blinked slowly. Time thinned into patience. Down the hill a siren drifted, and faded. Alex pictured the porch, the unmarked cars turning sighs into steady lines inside a notebook. He also pictured the card on his pillow, and Laura reading it, the way her mouth would tighten first, then soften, then call. He had left his phone on the desk so it would not ping like a lighthouse. He wanted to be found later, when the problem had changed shape.
Dusk slipped between branches. Echo lifted his head and gave one soft sound that meant some boundary had moved. Alex listened and heard distant tires settle into a curb. He peered through the slit and caught a rectangle of street far away. A black sedan had returned to their block and stopped in shadow. He could not see the house, only the slow rhythm of headlights breathing. Then silence as the lights died. Plans had collided in the dark. One in a living room, one in a car. He placed his palm on Echo's shoulder. "We wait," he whispered. "Then we go home when it's safe." Echo stayed still, a living anchor in a wooden room. Somewhere beyond the pines, adults consulted. Pages rustled, and radios nodded. Inside a tree, a child counted breaths and believed that protecting a friend was the job he had already accepted before anyone else wrote it down.
Dusk pulled through Miller's woods. In the treehouse, Alex and Echo kept still, sharing granola and quiet. Alex rationed water, tucked his stuffed bear beside a bandana bed, and watched a sliver of road through a seam by the trapdoor. Far away, a car idled and went silent. Echo listened with his whole body, breath low, ears cupped to the clearing. Alex tightened the loose loop of leash around his wrist. "We'll wait," he whispered. Echo settled against his shin, calm as a held note. At the house, Laura found the card on Alex's pillow and felt the floor tilt. The porch plan had met a child's promise and split. She called Robert, then patrol, and pushed the alert wide. Units marked routes to the woods. An unmarked car slid to the trailhead. Laura moved fast beneath the maple, voice steady, because panic wastes time. Her phone rang. An unfamiliar number filled the screen, and would not stop. She answered. "Bring the dog alone, or the boy disappears," a voice said, flat and bored, as if kidnapping were a chore. "No police. 30 minutes. She hung up and immediately called the detective, repeating the sentence word for word. "We're moving now," he said. "Hold position. Keep your ringer on." In the treehouse, Echo lifted his head and gave 2 short barks, then one, the exact signal Robert had taught to call for help. The sound crossed wet air like a coded flare. Sirens woke far off and built in measured layers. Not panic, but direction. Alex pressed his ear to the floor. The boards returned a faint vibration, the world rearranging itself into a line that led here. He placed his palm on Echo's neck and whispered the word that meant hold. Boots scraped the ladder. Metal sighed. The climb began. Alex clipped Echo's leash and positioned himself to the right of the opening, so the trapdoor stayed between them and whatever road. A wrist appeared first, a braided red and black cord bright against skin, then a forearm, then knuckles testing the plank. Echo's ears tipped forward. The man leaned to search the gloom. Alex tapped twice. Release on command, then step back. Echo waited, coiled without tremble. The face lifted. For a blink their eyes met through the narrow space, and the intruder grinned as if already victorious. Echo launched. The bite took the wrist with trained precision. The ladder jerked. A shout cracked the clearing. Echo held for a beat, released on cue, and backed to Alex's shoulder, with teeth bared and posture ready. The man fell hard onto wet earth, and rolled clutching his arm. Another figure swore and started up, then froze when a red pulse swept the trunk. Sirens rounded the ball fields, and dampened to a decisive hush. "Sheriff's office," a voice called. "Hands where we can see them." A third shape lunged for the path, and met a beam that did not waver. Commands stacked. Boots split the brush. Radios answered. An officer climbed slowly, announced himself, and nudged the trapdoor with 2 fingers. "You okay?" he asked, keeping his frame small. Alex nodded. He tried to come in. Echo wouldn't let him. "I can see that," the officer said with quiet pride. He guided boy and dog down, step by step, until boots met mud. Laura broke the tape strung between trunks, and gathered her son's forehead to his hair. Hand on Echo's crown, rain matted her sleeves, but her voice held. For the report camera, she spoke the sentence she had promised to honor when fear wanted to swallow the night. "If a child's bravery ever inspired you, type kids are heroes below. Let's amplify their courage." Echo's tail tapped once, solemn as a salute. Cuffs clicked. The fallen man sat against a stump, wrist wrapped in a field bandage,
mouth set. Another lay face down with hands laced. A third stepped from behind a cedar, when a handler's low command convinced him running would only add mistake. Detectives worked with deliberate economy, bagging a tranquilizer tube, lifting a glove that matched prints at Laura's slider, and collecting a phone that had slipped from a pocket. A medic checked Alex and nodded. Robert arrived through the brush and put a steadying hand on Echo's shoulder, pride and sorrow braided tight. The lead detective crouched to Alex's height. "You picked a strong refuge," he said. "You waited. You signaled. You held." Alex nodded. "Echo told me how to wait." Laura recited the call again. "Bring the dog alone, or the boy disappears," she said. "Steady now." The detective looked to the cuffed men. "Who gave the order?" The bandaged one spat. "Orders are orders." "Whose?" Silence held until fear cracked it. "Bradley," he muttered. "Officer Bradley runs pickups and shifts. He chose this house because the kid is soft." Echo stood taller, Robert's jaw set, then eased for the dog's sake. Radios tightened. A supervisor relayed the name, requested warrants and pinged units with plate. 2 officers walked the cuffed men toward the path. Another angled a light to reveal a flat patch, where fresh tracks wrinkled moss. At the curb beyond the trees, a black sedan idled and then found itself bracketed by unmarked cars. A woman lifted her hand. A man in the back reached for something he should not have reached for, and met a beam, and a sentence that convinced him to stop. Engines cooled. Pens wrote. The net held. Robert kneeled by Echo, and praised him in the old cadence, careful to keep adrenaline from turning victory into noise. "Bite. Hold. Release," he murmured. "You chose the exact beat." Echo's tail tapped. He turned his head toward Alex, and waited until the boy's palm found his neck. The final check that completes the sequence. Laura kissed Alex's temple and breathed deep enough to put air back where worry had lived. "No more solo missions," she said, firm yet gentle. "We plan together." "Together," Alex answered, letting the words settle where fear had been. Before they left, the detective held up the recovered phone and asked the bandaged man for the code. "Badge number," the thief said. "He likes feeling official." The detective entered digits, and opened a stream of messages. Addresses, shifts, plate photos, payments, and instructions signed with a single initial B. He looked up, confirmation heavy, but clean. "It's him," he said, speaking for the record, and for the ache in Robert's eye. "Officer Bradley is the boss." They walked out of Miller's Woods as the storm's last drops let go of the leaves. The air smelt of cedar and wet iron. Neighbors waited behind tape at the street's edge, faces pale in patrol light, disbelief mixing with relief as mother, son and dog appeared whole. Echo rode home with his head across Alex's lap, watching the road as if memorizing it again. Not to fear it but to claim it. The treehouse faded into dark, only boards and rain scent now. Yet a small history had been written there by a boy who kept a promise, and a dog who refused to forget who he was. Ahead waited justice, and behind them the woods exhaled, grateful witnesses to brave patience and truth.
Dawn came clear after the storm. Detectives split into teams before sunrise, warrants signed and routes mapped. Unmarked units rolled toward Officer Bradley's bungalow, while parallel crews traced payments tied to shell names. At a stucco house, the first knock met practiced silence. A ram spoke once. Inside, commendations lined a wall above a couch facing a locked cabinet. They cut the lock and found ledgers, prepaid phones, and laminated intake cards with photographs of stolen dogs, each marked with price, temperament codes, and destination initials. In a closet, a duffel held sedative darts, 2 catch poles, and a stencil reading Canine Training used to disguise movement. Under the bed, a folder listed contracts for private handlers, each tied to a shell company and a crypto exchanger, a whiteboard named routes. Suburbs, fares, parking decks, rest stops, shelters, parks. Near the bottom, a single word, across town, a second team hit a warehouse by the freight spur. 2 padlocks clicked, and a metal door rose on a room. Collars hung in rows, some stitched with family names. Bins held bowls and leashes. A freezer stored syringes and vials for veterinary use. Lot numbers matched to invoices from a clinic 2 counties away. Kennels stood scrubbed yet stained. Swabs and luminol took the story into evidence. Across 2 borders, partners opened a farmhouse loft and a city storage bay and found the same pattern. The incident board filled with pins spanning 3 states, and the ring's shape became proof. While evidence moved into boxes, Robert brought Echo to headquarters for evaluation. The bandage had come off, and the limp had faded to a measured step. A trainer ran him through obedience, scent work and environmental drills, while a veterinarian checked joints and eyes. Echo worked with quiet vigor. He pivoted cleanly, tracked a hidden article, ignored a dropped sandwich, climbed open stairs, and sat with the crisp square used in school gyms. When the trainer nodded to the chief, she smiled. "Reinstated, effective today," she said, and clipped a badge to Echo's collar. Robert's eyes shone. Alex, waiting by the door with Laura, clapped and hugged the dog, who answered with a single thump of tail. The press gathered in the lobby. The chief described the raids and traced pins across a projected map. Bradley's arrest photo appeared beside a timeline. At the close, she turned to the family. "One more recognition," she said, inviting Alex forward. She placed a small shield on a ribbon and announced a junior community safety officer program. "Courage can be learnt young," she said. "Thank you for looking closer when others looked away." Echo stepped near, and unprompted, set his paw on Alex's shoulder. Cameras caught the gesture. The room drew a collective breath. The following afternoon, City Hall filled again. The council rushed a vote after brief statements from neighbors and students. The motion passed without dissent, and the clerk entered a new name for the park under the oak: Second Chances Park. A fresh sign went up the same day. At the ceremony, the mayor invited Laura, Alex and Robert to the podium. Echo lay at the boy's shoes, eyes bright. The mayor spoke of neighborliness and how safety grows from small mercies. She pinned a matching badge to Alex's blazer and thanked the department for refusing to look away. News traveled fast. A national morning show invited them the next week. Alex learned to sit still, while a producer clipped a mic and learned to look at a lens without losing his own eyes. On the couch he sat between Laura and Robert, with Echo steady by his shoes. The host asked how it feels to choose kindness when louder voices want noise. "Warm," Alex said, and the studio softened. They told the story without drama. A park, a promise, a window, a storm, a plan. Clips traveled. Principals invited them for assemblies. Robert stood on gym floors with Alex beside him. Echo demonstrated focus. Down and hold, while Robert translated signals into choices. Any kid could practice. Alex shared a pocket rule: look harder. Letters arrived in bunches, envelopes fat with crayon, and hope. Some were from kids who were told their pets were mean. "My dog isn't mean," one message said. "He gets scared. I will stay." A girl wrote about a shepherd that guarded her wheelchair. A boy sent a photo of a pit mix wearing a paper crown. Laura taped the notes on the fridge around a calendar of visits, and a flyer for the next park cleanup. Echo's window blanket stayed in place, but the lookout changed tone. He napped more and rose with purpose when footsteps shifted. He walked each route as if riding calm onto pavement. When children asked to pet him, Alex taught them to offer a hand and wait for consent. At home, life found a steady key. Homework, dinners, baths, and early bedtimes returned, punctuated by travel days that never became the point. Robert visited each morning. To drill short sets and drink coffee he pretended not to like. Sometimes he and the chief met in quiet halls, and let silence hold what words could not mend. On a bright Saturday, the new sign gleamed at the entrance. Second Chances Park, shown in clean paint. Families gathered under the oak where the story had turned. A plaque at the base read, "In honor of every lost soul who found home through love." Robert traced the letters and stood straighter. The chief thanked the departments that had worked across borders. The mayor thanked the family that opened a door when judgment wanted it shut. Alex spoke last. "We were both lost that day," he said to Echo. "Now we are found." The shepherd leaned in with a soft chuff that made strangers smile. They walked a slow lap around the paths where everything began, and continued. Matching badges flashed in the light. Echo paced beside Alex, posture tall, confidence quiet. A partner returned to work and to play. Across 3 states, crates emptied,
Records became charges, and families opened gates to greet dogs they thought gone forever. The case moved forward through calendars and careful filings. The city moved forward through routines made gentler by a window, guard and a child's vow. Fame faded into a background hum that did not compete with supper or bedtime. What stayed was practice. Feed patience. Plan ahead. Look again, and choose the kinder route when fear shouts. At night, Alex set his badge on the dresser and smoothed Echo's blanket by the window. Sometimes the dog slept with his head on the sill, watching a quiet street he had decided to protect. Sometimes he turned and pressed closer to the boy who had offered crackers when the world offered stone. On those nights, Laura paused at the doorway and let gratitude take its time. She knew storms would return and sirens would rise, but the house had learnt the sound of courage, and so had the city. Under the new sign where long shadows fall, children run, laughter lifts, and a shepherd with a history greets strangers with a measured tale, and a gaze that says, "Second chances are a duty we share." Truly.
1 year later, the sky over Willowbrook looked scrubbed and bright, as if the town had taken a deep breath together. People drifted into Second Chances Park carrying picnic quilts, paper cups and leashes that jingled. The oak stood broad and calm where fear had once gathered. A velvet cloth hid a new plaque at the roots. Children had painted river stones with paws and stars and lined them like a frame. Laura, Robert, Alex and Echo waited with the chief near a small riser. Echo rested his chin on Alex's shoe and watched the crowd with that balanced attention that always made strangers relax. The school band warmed up. A cluster of students held poster board signs with hand-drawn badges. Parents waved. A breeze moved through the leaves, turning their undersides pale for a moment and then settling. Vendors closed coolers. Neighbors moved closer. When the mayor stepped up, the murmurs thinned. She spoke about the year that followed, a storm. Warrants served. Kennels opened. Families matched with collars, found in warehouses, and court dates stacked like stepping stones. She thanked the officers who worked quiet hours and the volunteers who rebuilt fences. She nodded toward Robert and said, "A city learns courage by watching gentle practice repeated until it becomes habit." Then she turned to Laura and Alex. "You reminded us to look again," she said. Cameras clicked once and then dimmed, as if agreement were more important than noise. The ribbon came off the velvet cloth. The bronze plate shone in the noon light. Its words were simple and exact. "In memory of all lost souls who find home through love." Robert's breath caught. He let it out as if setting a box down. Echo shifted forward and placed one paw on the soil beside the plaque. An unlearned gesture that felt as deliberate as any command. Alex reached to steady him and didn't need to. The dog was steady on his own. The chief invited Alex to say a few words. He climbed the short step and found Echo already beside him. "We stood here a year ago," he began, voice small but clear, "and a lot of people were scared, including me. I gave crackers to a dog who looked like trouble, and found a friend who was trying not to be seen. We were both lost that day, and we found each other." Echo bumped his knee once. Alex smiled. "If you meet someone who looks hard to love, give them a minute. Check for the quiet signs. Ask before you judge." That is what Echo taught me. That is what this place says, every day. The principal presented a binder of letters from students, crayon drawings of shepherds with crowns, cats beside walkers, pit mixes under blankets, and captions about second chances. A national morning show crew set a tripod by the path, but stayed back. The mayor handed Alex a framed print from last winter's ceremony. The moment Echo rested a paw on his shoulder, while the chief pinned a small badge to his blazer. "Junior Community Safety Officer," the caption said. It looked less like a title than a promise. People who had adopted from shelters lined up to touch the plaque. A woman in a denim jacket told Robert how her terrier barked until she checked the stove and found a pan smoking. A teenager described learning to read her anxious hound's ear flicks the way Alex had learnt. Echo. Laura listened to stories and heard a single theme. Attention is love, wearing work clothes. She tucked that sentence away for the quiet days when heroics are just careful routines. When the speeches ended, the band played a short march that drifted into a playful tune. Families slid blankets into totes. The baker passed a tray of shield-shaped cookies to the kids, who compared icing badges and traded crumbs. Echo took a slow lap with Alex, pausing where the oak's shade made a cool oval. The bark still held its old wounds, now part of the tree's identity rather than its definition. Alex rested a palm on the trunk. "Thank you," he whispered, not sure if he meant the tree, the town, or the friend whose shadow matched his. Echo leaned close, quiet and present. Robert stood with the chief near the edge of the crowd and talked about small triumphs. Echo, ignoring fireworks, kids practicing watch in school gyms, and assisted living residents brightening when a serious dog puts his chin on a quilt. He said discipline is love, that remembers the plan. The chief agreed. They let a shared silence do the rest. Laura found Alex and handed him a water bottle. "Ready to head home?" she asked. He looked toward the plaque one more time and nodded. Before they left, he turned to the people lingering by the riser and spoke into the last open mic, folding the channel between story and audience, without breaking it. If this story touched you, like to spread hope, share with someone who needs a reminder that kindness changes everything, and subscribe for more real stories of courage. Comment, where are you watching from, and what rescue animal changed your life? Your story might inspire the next Alex and Echo. The words hung warmly, not as a pitch, but as an invitation to join the work. On the way out, children stopped to pet Echo with permission. He stood loose and kind, accepting small hands and stepping back when he needed a breath. Parents thanked Laura for the steady example that had replaced panic with plans. A retired judge shook Robert's hand and said the case files would blur with time, but the park would keep saying the part that mattered. The wind turned leaves, so the lighter undersides showed, and then turned them back again. In the weeks that followed, messages reached their porch from farther towns. A firefighter wrote about a soot-streaked shepherd who had rejoined his crew. A grandmother described a one-eyed cat that guarded her knitting basket like treasure. A teenager sent a video of a once skittish dog sleeping through thunder after patient training. Alex pinned a world map on his wall and added colored threads from cities to Willowbrook, tracing how care travels when people are brave enough to share it. Home life stayed ordinary, which was what everyone wanted. Echo kept the window post, more nap than vigil now, though he still lifted his head when a van idled too long. Alex did homework on the rug and practiced the quiet cue that means focus before dinner. Laura ran loads of laundry, returned library books, set the table, and checked the back door with a fingertip, because habits built from fear can become gratitude when the house is safe. Robert showed up early, most mornings with coffee. He pretended not to like and praised Echo for choosing calm, even when excitement would have been easier. Seasons rolled. Winter lights made the plaque glint through bare branches. Spring sent dandelions across the grass like tiny suns. Summer deepened the shade. The badge on Alex's dresser earned small scratches that made it look like a tool, not a prize. Echo's limp faded into memory. He moved with a long, easy stride that made strangers smile. The black sedan never returned, though unmarked cars still roamed at odd hours, as a courtesy that became tradition. On the anniversary evening, the sun lowered, until the letters on the park sign warmed from white to honey. The band cased their instruments. The last cookie van. A little boy asked if Echo could shake, and he did, solemn as a judge. Alex laughed and thanked him for asking first. Then he looked at Laura and Robert. "Can we walk home the long way?" Laura nodded. Robert tipped his cap, eyes wet in the kind way that does not embarrass anybody. They set off along the path that winds past the swings and the bench where everything had felt impossible, and then suddenly, not. As they reached the gate, the town behind them settled into an easy hush. Shop windows caught sunset and tossed it back in square. A bus sighed at a stop, then rolled away. Somewhere a radio played an old ballad. Echo walked shoulder to shoulder with Alex, their small badges catching the last light like two stars stitched to cloth and leather. They didn't hurry. They let the day stretch. They crossed with the signal, turned toward the maple that shadows their porch, and headed for the house that smells like dinners and pencil shavings and clean cotton. Their street rose gently, and then leveled. The sky went from honey to copper, to a faint blue that promised a clear night. Alex glanced at Echo, and saw his reflection in the glossy eyes that had once looked so clouded. He touched the badge at his chest, and felt its small weight. "We keep looking," he said. Echo flicked an ear as if to say he already
They reached the door, and Laura's keys chimed, and the lock turned, and the good ordinary poured out to meet them. The scene held a quiet gleam that felt like a benediction, a park with a new name, a plaque with plain words, a family that had learned how to pay attention, and a town ready to repeat the lesson. The last light slid along two small badges, as Alex and Echo stepped inside, glinting like a promise that would not fade.